people, thanks for coming back. This week we're going to be going into kind of cannabis and psychedelics, the natural medicines, as we could call it. Of course, Jeff, you're a big expert. I kind of want to kick it off with cannabis. Let's dive into the cannabis industry. I asked you 4 months ago, would you be an investor in cannabis? And you said no, you still think there's more blood to come. What's your feeling now, and would you still not be an investor?
So back then I had said that it's time to start putting some of the bigger names, the better names, on your watch list. But it wasn't time to kind of, get in there and start swimming around and buying them. There's still so much stuff on the balance sheet on these companies that need to be written either completely off or almost completely off. And we're seeing that companies like Aurora writing off tons of assets and others. And quite frankly, I don't understand how management of these companies, past management, now there's new management, God knows who's at the helm of these things now, but I don't understand how these guys have gotten away scot-free. To me, some of these things looked like a criminal organization. Some of these acquisitions that were made at prices that were just absolutely crazy. And now here we stand today with the little investor holding the bag. The big guys, the insiders, all profited. They took a hike, and the little guys sitting there holding the bag. So, ultimately what you end up with in these types of scenarios is these companies will go through a share consolidation where they, do a 20 for 1, a 50 for 1, whatever it may be. They then clean up the balance sheet and try and find new equity from new players, new shareholders. But again, unfortunately, the old guys who are there to support and got lured into the story, they're left holding the bag. They really end up with not much at all. They end up losing, 90% of their investment, if not more. So for me at the moment, I think that you still kind of stand on the sidelines and you look at some of the better so-called names and bigger names, and like a Canopy, and you wait for more of these write-downs to take place. That blood and pain is not over. There will be many more write-downs coming in the next quarter or two. And at that point, probably, early next year, somewhere around there is a good time when you can enter these stocks where the risk has been reduced. Right. Listen, the business is not going away. There will be some of the better players that do some good things. I see Canopy now kind of announcing that they're happy to have Martha Stewart in their line of products coming out, and I had to have a laugh at that. I'm like, I don't know, but does anybody really care if Martha Stewart launches a CBD line? I mean, surely there are better people out there that you could have to develop a line and bring to market. But Martha Stewart, I don't know if anyone really cares. So, but anyway, that's a Canopy product that's coming to market. I wish them well. I hope it does do well. Anyway, that's kind of my feeling on the cannabis space at the moment. Continue to look at it, wait for more write-downs, and maybe in the coming months or something, you start dipping your toe in.
Well, on that point, just to take it another step further, and we talk about from an investing standpoint, and I'll get both of your guys' thoughts. What about from an industry standpoint? Not so much from an investing, but is cannabis growing? What's your guys' thoughts? And I say that, it's hard to walk into a store and not see, CBD, at least in Canada and in tons of other places. What's your guys' take, where you're seeing CBD infused toothpaste, whatever you can imagine, you're seeing it, coffee, obviously I think it actually makes sense, but you're seeing tons of other things and maybe products that aren't realistic. At least that's what it feels like. Is the amount of people using CBD growing? What's your guys' thoughts?
So hey, Luca, I'll start on that one first. It definitely is. There's no doubt about it. So consumers are out there. They're slowly but surely getting educated, and they're testing products to see whether or not, they're getting a benefit. And you mentioned oral care. Our company, Wuhan M2 Biosciences, has a line of oral care, CBD, mouthwash, toothpaste, and things like that. And in specifically how that helps the consumer is from the antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties of CBD that help a user. So for us, it was an absolute no-brainer to do it. We have three, one for children and two flavors, one charcoal, one an aloe vera for adults, and we'll be launching those very soon. So there is great science behind it that makes a lot of sense. And unfortunately, people, I think I've spoken about this before, but people just don't spend enough time on oral care. Oral care is just so incredibly important, and we just don't do it. We don't think about it. We think, it's just our mouth, it's fine. We don't need to, brush our teeth or use mouthwash, but you do. It is just so incredibly important. So that's kind of my little bit of a riff on that. But on the CBD side and adoption of products, yes, it is. And I think, I've spoken about it before at our company, M2 Bio. What hopefully separates us and a big differentiator we have is that our products are actually backed by rigorous science and backed by, medical professionals, Dr. NRX being the line, where we actually do the science to figure out whether or not it does make sense. Many of the products that do come to market are just thrown together, like you said, Jason. They say, oh, geez, hey, we're going to make butter croissants. Should we throw CBD in those? It's like, butter croissants and CBD? I don't think so. Like, what? There are products that do make good common sense. Coffee is one of them. Of course, we're doing that as well. And the rest of them, people, they're trying to jump on the bandwagon and take advantage of the situation, I think. Yeah. Luca, what are your thoughts?
Right. It's very interesting that you mentioned the oral hygiene being a very important thing, which it absolutely is. And it comes down to something similar, which we spoke about recently, like normal hygiene that we put on focus now just because of the pandemic. I'm stunned that we need a pandemic to put hygiene in focus, and same goes for the oral care. Like what needs to happen for us to put that as a focus? And it's so important that we take care of our teeth. We have one pair throughout majority of our life, so it's really important that we take very good care of them. And cannabis is an amazing product to do that with.
And Luke, I've got a question for you, and I'm gonna hit you with this one. Jeff got the industry growth. I'm curious, you obviously you mentioned you've invested in a few of these cannabis companies before. I'm gonna ask, at the beginning of the kind of cannabis cycle, everyone was a producer. From producing cannabis wise, you've seen Canopy leave Africa and some other places, and it almost seems like people are scaling down. Are we seeing more cannabis being produced now? And, obviously, I almost feel like sometimes it felt like there was a saturation of too much cannabis being grown. What's your guys' take? And Luca, starting with you, very curious.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'll start with mentioning a local fact here. As I'm in Denmark right now, Aurora Cannabis was actually planning a huge plant here in the middle of Denmark, which was rumored to be able to completely flood and overflood the European cannabis market. They put, I don't know how many millions of US dollars into that project, and once the stocks cratered, they had to pull out, stop the production, and that facility is now not complete. So what we've seen with cannabis has definitely been the commoditization of the industry, where it's become cheaper, it's become more readily available, and many more who've got the licenses have optimized their productions and so on. So with fewer players, with less buzz, we get more output, and we're seeing the prices becoming cheaper and moving more towards products and brands than actually the supply itself.
Good, excellent summation, Luca. I'll add just a bit to that, Jason, on local knowledge as to what we're doing here. So our company M2 Bio, we just put out a press release the other day describing our relationship that has now gone to originally we were buying the Simi Pharmaceuticals up in Lesotho, and we had to go through a due diligence period in order to do it. I went to Lesotho 10 days ago. Everything, the sniff test was all great, came back. So we're now in the process of concluding and actually going ahead with that property. In the press release, we described how profitable it is to do what we do in Lesotho and the reasons why. And it actually, I look around and I say to myself, as does Willem Jonker, who has become our COO, we announced that last week. We ask ourselves, why would anybody in Canada, even think and contemplate really about growing cannabis? Is the weather the right place? Is the soil the right thing? And so we ask all these questions, and the answer is always no. Many of these people thought, oh, geez, like when Canopy came here, oh, geez, we'll just start growing a ton of cannabis and then we'll figure it out. Instead of asking themselves, who's the buyer? We're going to plant a ton of cannabis, but who's going to buy what we've grown, and what are we growing? There are so many strains that you should consider when growing cannabis, like, what percentage, and who, if you do have a buyer, they're going to probably want a specific strain. So in Lesotho, where we're about to break ground soon, in the press release we said Q2, Q3 for first delivery. Our buyer is from the EU, and they will ask, or they will want a specific strain and a specific amount. So at our first facility, that is exactly what we'll grow for them. So we have our offtake, we know what it is that we need to grow, and that way we're able to plan very well as to budgeting and what we'll make from this operation. But most, when they got involved in this industry, they said, oh my God, we got a license, we got this, let's start growing cannabis. Meanwhile, all these guys were clueless, no experience, they've never done it before, and they were just manufacturing press releases left and right so they could sell more stock and raise more money and do whatever they did. So right. That's a little bit of the backstory there. If you're back to your question, is there an abundance of pot everywhere? My answer to that is there ever? And a lot of it's just going to go rotten. Canada, you've got a ton of it now. You can't export it. So you guys are sitting on a ton of cannabis, but what are you going to do with it? You can't get rid of it. Nobody wants it. So it's the wrong cannabis. A lot of it's the wrong cannabis. In Africa, the original cannabis grown by a couple of the companies in Canada, listed companies, one of them being Canopy. Nobody wants that. Why? Because it's not even certified. It's like, what went through the minds of these people just to start growing cannabis without even wondering what type should we grow? Crazy, absolute crazy, irresponsible, a complete, in terms of really messing up your shareholders, it just wasn't fair whatsoever.
Yeah. Right. To add one last point on the consumer side, what we're seeing back in the day when the buzz was kind of at the peak, the consumers were more interested in the, let's say, get high effect of it, or at least the misconception of it. Or I'm going to try to buy a cannabis product, a CBD product, because I might get high. Oh, what's it going to do to me with the coffee? I have to be careful, which was complete misconception of it. And what the difference is today, which we see in the market, is consumer have been educated about it. They don't go out and purchase cannabis products for the purpose of experimenting whether they're going to get high or not, but more in terms of the medicinal conditions that they might hope to alleviate and assist. So we definitely see a shift there in the consumer behavior, and we even see some of those products penetrating the Indian market, which is very interesting.
No, extremely interesting. Both very good points. So I'm going to take this the next step further. You're saying, CBD is growing, the use of cannabis is growing. Yeah, there's a supply and demand factor that's, maybe an issue right now. Hopefully it's going to figure its way out. Seems like there's going to be more of a specialty growing for certain, strains, like you said. But taking that one step further, if there's some, you don't need to be growing marijuana to be in the industry. Would you look at investments or any type of companies that maybe, hypothetically speaking, they make the clones, they make the lighting, they make this, they make that? Is that something that maybe, hey, if you're looking for the industry long term and maybe something that isn't super overvalued, could you look there?
Absolutely. So great call, Jason. I don't have a list in particular in front of me. I have looked at some of them. In the early days, 2, 3 years ago, Scott's Grow was one of those. The stock did very well, pulled back, did very well. Things like that are definite opportunities. Companies that may make the lights, companies that may make the particular strains, absolutely great idea, genetics behind it. So for us, again, also the science behind what it is that we're doing. And it's a very big thing. And we'll be going into clinical trials on the cannabis side as it relates to certain inflammatory markers that we're going after.
Yeah.
It's something we spoke about. It is something that Dr. Anna wrote a beautiful piece about back in March, about a definite, in her mind at the time, a definite correlation between inflammatory diseases within the lungs, bronchial, and CBD or cannabis. And funnily enough, back then, this was kind of just when COVID was really getting rock and rolling. Back then, she actually got a lot of pushback from a lot of people that said, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. Well, here we are in South Africa today. South Africa, I believe now, is the only country in the world that is currently conducting a cannabis COVID clinical trial. So hat tip to South Africa for being way ahead of the curve, and a hat tip for Dr. Anna for being way ahead of the curve back in March for writing that very insightful paper she did.
Yeah.
A particular, let's say, a tangent on that question, Jason, where you asked for different companies that could be profiting from the cannabis thing is an odd one, which is actually security companies. Many of these cannabis facilities require very, very top security, both in terms of fencing, surveillance, all kinds of tools, and many of those companies are providing these high-tech solutions for cannabis plantations that if you do the due diligence and figure out what you're actually into, could be a profitable investment.
Yeah.
Actually, hey, Luca, that's a great point. So, hey, Jason, just quickly on that. So it is amazing to see the difference in how nowadays you approach the construction and the erection of a cannabis operation. 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, you'd buy a bunch of the greenhouses, the tunnels, you'd put them up, and you would go out and buy the lighting, and you would go out and buy all these things independently, separately, put them all together, and bingo, you spent $50 million and you got a tunnel. Well, today, actually, you can buy beautifully, prefab, all-in-one things that can go up in a matter of a week. Where up in Lesotho, or sorry, not in Lesotho, but about an hour and a half outside of Cape Town, there's an amazing operation where it's not a publicly traded company, but they build these grow houses that are almost like a prefab where everything is ready to go. It gets shipped, it goes there, and boom, your greenhouse is up up in 3-4 days, and it's got all the lighting, the irrigation systems, everything is included, so you know exactly what your costs are going in, which is just such it's an amazing advancement in these types of operations. It really is remarkable to see.
Yeah. Here, I'll drop one. Personally, the equipment side of cannabis is interesting. There's one company, I don't know the full details, do your own DD stuff, all that. But these guys make LED lights primarily for cannabis growth. They've done side-by-side comparisons. The guys behind it are actually, kind of old Army vets that they were doing like mechanical engineering. Even before marijuana was what they were doing, they had they made street lights. He had one cool case study. I've seen him talk, and it was saving baby turtles where they would hatch, and usually they look to the moon, and then they crawl or walk, however we want to call it, towards the moon, which is typically over water or over the ocean. But they would get confused looking at like street lights and stuff like that, and so they were able to make lights and certain frequencies, and for growing, again, no scientists, but being able to grow a plant 50% bigger than using a high pressure sodium, which I guess is the kind of industry standard, is pretty cool. Of course, I think their lights cost more, but give off significantly less heat. I thought it was interesting. Again, Light Engine Design is the company worth about 10 mil right now.
I would just love to add to that, Jason. That's very interesting. But up in Lesotho, we have 308 days of sunshine.
Yeah.
So that is free. And, it's obviously part of the economic model as to why it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Mother Nature sits here and provides a beautiful sunshine that is absolutely free.